Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk On. I'm your host, Max Chadwick. So we've talked to some media personalities in college football. We talked to some players in college football. This guy runs one of the biggest all-star games in college football. His name is Eric Galko, Director of Football Operations and Player Personnel for the East-West Shrine Bowl. Like I said, one of the premier showcase all-star games for college football players. Eric, thank you so much for coming on, man. I feel like this is a long time coming.
Awesome, Max. Appreciate having me on, man. I'm a big fan of the show, so I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, of course. So the first question I want to ask you, obviously the East-West Shrine Bowl has been in Las Vegas for the longest time. Now you guys are moving it to the Dallas area from Las Vegas. What kind of went into that decision, and how excited are you to be near Jerry's World, basically?
Yeah, no, super excited. And I took over the Shrine Bowl 2.5 years ago, about 2.5 years ago now. And the game had been in St. Pete, Tampa area for a while, and it was okay, but I thought giving our players a chance to perform in an NFL facility was really important. I want to have a best-in-class experience for our guys, and got a chance to kind of shop around a little bit, talk to a lot of different facilities, and we ended up going to Las Vegas, where the Pro Bowl was at the time, and get a chance to play at Allegiant Stadium, and the Raiders facility was awesome, I think, for our players, along with all the stuff we do. And after 2 years there, I want to kind of consider other opportunities. And long story short, when Dallas and Frisco, Texas, and the Cowboys say, hey, the Star may be available to work with, and having a great hotel as well too, it felt like an undeniable opportunity to look at. And I'm incredibly thankful to be a part of and work with City of Dallas, City of Frisco, the Cowboys, their facility, and all of our partners are running in Dallas. It's going to be an awesome event. I think we did a great job in Vegas, and I can tell you, I promise, it's going to be even better this year now in Dallas and Frisco.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make it down this past year to Vegas, but I'm definitely going to hopefully make it down to Dallas this year. I'm super excited for that. And the fact that he said he's going to be even better than last year is amazing, because last year, I mean, you guys killed it, I would say. You had a first-round pick. The first question I want to ask you about from last year's class that you guys had was your first-round pick, and Zay Flowers, who obviously really blew up at that Shrine Bowl, was eventually the Ravens' first-round pick. How excited were you to get a talent like Zay Flowers? And did you kind of know when he was there with you in Vegas, like, oh, this guy is going to go pretty highly in the draft?
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Zay quite a bit during his senior season, and he's a special person. I know I tell people all the time, I come across as biased. He came to the Shrine Bowl. He's my guy, so I feel like I'm almost like an agent of his, right, endorsing him. But just talking with him and talking to players for, going on 15 years in my career, as well as in the Shrine Bowl process last couple of years, he's just wired a different way. And I think he like a lot of players more and more, are really thoughtful and have their own kind of like, hey, what's going to be best for me, not just kind of following what other people are doing. And I think a lot of players in college football are doing that more and more. And I think he believed in kind of, hey, the opportunities on player health and wellness, NFL facility, great coaching, all that stuff at the Shrine Bowl made sense for him too. But man, I can't say enough about Zay Flowers. I know people think I'm hyperbolic. Like, I think he'll be one of the best receivers in football in the next 2 years. I think he's going to be, he already is talking to college athletes now. Like, he's the guy that receivers in college are watching to get better as a route runner. Like, he's the guy. And I think his personality, his confidence, his ability, being an undersized guy like Steve Smith and having that kind of personality, like, it's going to resonate. And I think he'll be one of the more recognizable faces in football in the next 2-3 years. I know it sounds crazy. We've got a lot of great receivers in football, but I think Zay is that special.
I love that so much. And yeah, that route running ability, man, is off the charts for him. So you mentioned like the Steve Smith. Is there a certain player that you have in mind whenever you watch Zay Flowers?
I mean, Steve Smith and the Ravens, and also just the size and the personality always jumped out too. I think a lot of people said Antonio Brown, which I think is an awesome one. And I think his ability to win, and Antonio was so good because he's twitchy enough and balanced enough to win in the short area, and being a guy who can play slot and Z, comparisons are there. But what made Brown special, even towards the back end of his career when he kind of maybe lost a little bit of a step, was just how refined and how confident was the route runner. And it's almost like a Steph Curry-like comparison where, like, even when he's kind of off, everything's so precise that the DB's just terrified all the time. Yeah. And I think you saw in college, like, DBs, when a guy like Zay, who's 5'9", 5'10", can win in traffic downfield like he did in that Louisville game, which is like an iconic highlight for him too. Like, that's when you're a DB, you're just like, I can't win this game. Right? I can't win this route. And I think that's where I think Zay's been doing the NFL pretty early on. And I think his last season at Boston College, where, hey, that team was a bit young on offense and he had to be the guy every game. Again, I mean, there's Steph Curry comparison, but like, Zay already had what I think is a rookie year in the NFL, his last year at BC, right? He had to deal with double coverage. He had to deal with consistent press contact. He had to deal with an offense kind of forcing the ball to him and working with tight windows. And I think he'll hit the ground running as a rookie better than any other receiver in last year's draft.
I can't wait to watch him with Lamar Jackson too. That's gonna be so much
Yeah.
fun. But obviously Zay Flowers is probably the biggest success story you guys had last year. But I mean, you guys had 7 top 100 picks, 2 quarterbacks selected. You had 45 draft picks, which was the most in a decade. Did you kind of know that the 2023 senior Shrine Bowl that you had was like the special one? And how did the scouting process? Did you kind of know, that all the scouts that you had working for you, like, hey, we are killing it right now. We have a lot of premier talent that's coming to the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, I think the quarterbacks have been fun. We had 2 of the first 3 quarterbacks from any All-Star game that came from the Shrine Bowl. So I think NFL teams got a chance to see some really good quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell of Purdue and Dorian Thompson-Robins at UCLA. Both guys we had invited the previous year, which may be surprised because they were kind of under the radar coming into their senior season. But those are 2 guys that, we knew a lot. Obviously, Dorian grew up in Las Vegas, and he was excited to come to Las Vegas and play in front of his hometown. And Aiden O'Connell, a guy I built a relationship with for a while. But I think those 2 guys impressed. But I'm thankful that a lot of guys, I think, rose at the Shrine Bowl, and not because it's a cliche, right? Like, oh, this guy wrote winners and losers. But, I take a lot of pride in sending these guys out for success all week. And I think guys like Juice Scruggs, who, teams knew they liked him a lot, but he was healthy and he won all 4 days of practice all week long. He didn't wear down as the week went along, which a lot of guys do at All-Star games. So I think our guys, especially our top guys, kind of a chance to be healthy all week long and enjoy the process was awesome. And I'm super proud of our staff. You mentioned, I appreciate you giving a shout out. I can name all their guys. Shane Coughlin's my right-hand man on scouting. We got Owen Reese. We got David Wells, Riley Bymaster, so many guys on our staff. We had 15 players that weren't invited to the combine that got drafted, which from my point of view says, hey, these are the guys that our scouts vouch for, that even NFL teams said, nah, no thanks, right, when we invited them. So I think we did a good job scouting-wise this past year. I'm proud of that too. But hey, we had a good year this past year, but we'll have a much better year next year moving forward, man. We're excited to kind of keep having the best in class event for these guys.
I love that so much. So obviously, you mentioned that scouting process. I can't even imagine what that scouting process is like, going through not only FBS schools, FCS schools, D2 schools, even D3 schools sometimes too. What is that scouting process like when you're trying to find guys that you're going to invite to the next Shrine Bowl game?
I think the really important part of a couple of things of our process that I care about. Number one is really being aggressive in filtering, and not like ruling guys out for no reason, but thankfully I've done for a long time, where we were consulting in the past or still doing it now, is finding analytics, finding data, using information year after year, right? When you're watching a player, when you're watching a small school, don't just watch the senior, right? Watch a couple guys, keep an eye on them, and building really good processes for us to make sure we're narrowing it down from, the 10,000 guys that are overall in our database to, for us, the Shrine Bowl 1,000, which comes out, in a month or so here, right? Kind of narrowing that list down a lot there too, using a lot of data analytics to make sure we're doing things correctly. I think we have one of, if not the best in the football world. No offense to NFL teams, but spent a lot of time kind of perfecting our analytics process the last few years and feel confident in that piece of it too. And then the last piece for us that I drive home to all of our young scouts, and I'm very thankful, we've had 10 people from our staff over the last 3 years go to the NFL from the Optimum Scouting / Shrine Bowl. So we got a good pipeline going, and I instill in them kind of know the background of these players, right? Be able to really know where they came from to predict where they're going. And I think a lot of people get lost sometimes in the scouting piece. And I joke all the time, if I hear you say like hip fluidity, which like no one can define, it's this catch-all phrase, like I don't care about that. Tell me what he did in high school, where he was recruited at. Did he transfer? Why did he transfer? What his injuries were? Is that an issue? Is he older as a player? Is he younger as a player, right? Those kind of things I think are really, really helpful and kind of shape who a player is. And that allows us to kind of be early, be more convicted, and be more successful on guys the whole process.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some guys that even weren't invited to the combine that were drafted from the Shrine Bowl. Do you have any favorite success stories from the Shrine Bowl, where maybe a scout or maybe even you pounded the table for a guy and said, hey, listen, I know this isn't a guy that a lot of teams are talking about right now, but we need to have this guy here, and it ended up turning out pretty well for you guys?
Yeah, it's been a fun, especially for a lot of those 15 guys that were non-combine guys. I was able to, once those guys were invited and were on the way coming, I even told them hey, right now you're not going to see your names in mock drafts or big boards or wherever, but I got you, and you're going to get where you want to go. So guys like Kobe Turner of Wake Forest, Broderick Martin, I mean, those were guys when we invited. I got texts from scouts, even executives, being like, WTF, this guy's a PFA for us. What are you doing? And I'm just like, hey, no offense, whatever else. So it's a fun give and take. I obviously work with NFL teams all the time, and certainly we have misses too. I'm not saying that, but it gets us, our staff, a chance, and it really, our scouts, to give a chance to tell those NFL teams, hey, I'm responsible for inviting Kobe Turner to the Shrine Bowl. At least I played a big role in it. That's really powerful for our guys as well. But Kobe and Broderick Martin being non-combine top 100 picks, I think is outstanding. Antonio Mafi from UCLA, another guy the team said, hey, he's not really a guy. He gets picked. Derek Parrish is a guy who was a DN. He only played 4 games this year. We invite him as a fullback. He gets drafted 7th round. Proud of my guy Derek as well too. So no, those non-combine guys, we feel they're true scouting wins, but we're really proud of those guys as well too, because Kobe Turner had a great Shrine Bowl week and took care of business, but then he had a great pro day and dominated there. Roderick Martin is a monster of a human being and reminds me a lot of Jordan Davis, but he impressed interviews and was able to kind of pick up defenses quickly too. Antonio Mafi, again, he tested well. So those guys took care of business at the Shrine Bowl, but I have a special kinship with those non-combine guys because we believe in them, they believed in us, and they believe they'd be successful in the draft process.
I love that so much. So obviously a guy who took the NFL by storm last year and went to the Shrine Bowl was Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant himself, who, I mean, I love Brock Purdy at Iowa State. I thought he was severely underdrafted, but even I didn't see what he had coming. Were you kind of surprised by what Brock Purdy did immediately in his rookie year? Or did you kind of know when he was there in Vegas, like, no, this guy, even though he might be a 7th round pick, he's going to light it up?
Yeah, I kind of like Bill Point. Like I always saw 1st round pick Tom Brady, just like Brock Purdy always knew. No, I think, we like Brock in his college career, right? He was one of our top quarterbacks in that year's draft. And, I thought he was going to get drafted. I didn't think Mr. Irrelevant. I thought he was going to get picked. I wasn't surprised by him getting drafted. But I took away from Brock, and really for me, in this job especially, I get to talk to so many college players, sometimes or almost always before NFL teams do, right? So I got this kind of fresh perspective before they're kind of grounded, like how to interview with NFL teams. And you learn about these guys at a pretty raw level. And talking with Brock, I tell teams this all the time now and dealing with him in the process. He was a guy that you talk with him, you watch him work, in the film room and the build of the Shrine Bowl and all that stuff. And how I talked to him even before getting down there, what he cared about. He's a guy that you said, hey, if he comes in and he's our 3rd quarterback, he's going to give our first team a really good look in practice. And he's going to take care of business and be serious there. If he's your backup, he's a guy that's going to challenge your starter, but he's going to do what he has to do to be successful, and he's ready to go if you have to start games. And if he's your starter, he's not going to not have any confidence, and he's going to be a really confident, refined guy who's not going to hurt you. And I think I saw that then. And again, in hindsight, I should have been yelling for this guy, but I knew that back then, like, you know what, no matter what this guy's doing, he's got that confidence, but not an ego dynamic. And I think he knew who he was as a player. And then also give credit to Will Hewlett, his quarterback coach, who I think really improved his velocity during the draft process as well. I think those two things made him a player that, in hindsight, it's like so clear. In the moment, we hadn't seen a guy like that in a long time. And I think that's where Brock is. And again, I think Brock's going to be in the NFL for a long time. I love Brock because my background before the Shrine Bowl was in the XFL, exactly with the XFL. And my focus back then was, hey, I want, who the quarterbacks we can get that make sense for this league. And I said, hey, our offensive line may not be great for every team. I got to get quarterbacks who are confident and who can improvise, who can make plays off script. And that's why we signed PJ Walker and Taylor Heineke back at the XFL. And Brock fits that mold to a T and then some. So I always compare Brock to a Taylor Heineke, and he ended up being way more like Taylor Heineke than I expected as a rookie. But I'm proud of him, and I think he'll be the guy in San Fran this year and moving forward. And he's certainly earned it.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you wish you were screaming for that guy during the draft. Is there any guy in the 2023 class that came from the Shrine Bowl that you could not believe went as low as he did, and you think will really surprise a lot of people next year?
That's a good question. I think A.T. Perry jumps out as a receiver. I'm going top of my head here, but he went much later than I expected, and I think he's a guy that could start early on as a rookie. I think guys that went later than they probably should have too. Got me on the spot there. But he jumps out as one for sure that I think, man, that guy is an NFL starting receiver. How smooth is he is, how professional he is, able to come into an NFL team right away and adapt to a system. I think he's a guy that, I play fantasy football like everybody else does too. And I'm not saying he's your 1st round pick, but I think AT's a guy to monitor in training camp because he's a guy that jumps out to me that could be an absolute guy early on in his college and NFL career.
Absolutely. I loved A.T. Perry coming out of Wake Forest, so I could not believe he went as low as he did. So what are your initial thoughts on the 2024 class? It looks very offensive heavy, at least so far right now, but what are your initial takeaways from your early scouting for the 2024 class?
Yeah, one thing I talk to teams about sometimes, or not sometimes, oftentimes, is kind of looking at future years' drafts. And this past year, we had the lowest number of offensive tackles drafted in the last decade, which is crazy, right? You think offensive linemen are always so important. And there was a lot of guards and centers. Maybe some of those guys, the numbers get blurred a little bit, but not a lot of offensive tackles drafted. A lot of good ones went undrafted. I think this year, the offensive line continues to be a strength, and especially at offensive tackle in this year's draft. That jumps out right away. Watching a lot of these guys, we're we're thankfully kind of rounding third base in terms of our 2024 evals. We get an early start on these things. I think that's really strong. I think quarterback is immensely deep with a lot of capable NFL quarterbacks. Those top end guys are always hard to find. They're the Caleb Williams, Drake Mays, Quinn Ewers, those type of guys. Those guys don't come around every often. We're not like having 10 of them, but there's a lot of quarterbacks in college football this year that either stayed because of NIL or getting new opportunities or just it's their time and kind of a perfect storm of, hey, there might be 16, 17, 18 quarterbacks that teams might have draftable grades on, depending on which team it is. And that's a lot. So I think quarterback and offensive tackle and offense jump out to me. But I think overall it feels like a stronger group. But hey, these guys have options now to stay in school for NIL, and with teams paying as much as a third, fourth round pick. One team told me, hey, a player might almost come out for the draft this past year, and we got feedback that said he might be a fourth or fifth round pick. So called our collective, got him third round money, and he stayed in school. And it's like, you know what? We can be like, how crazy is that? But at the same time, it's awesome these players have that opportunity too. So I think a lot of guys will continue to want to stay in school. But as of right now, just looking at the board, it's definitely a stronger class than a year ago, and especially strong on the offensive line.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that quarterback class too. I mean, it's an older quarterback class besides obviously Caleb and Drake May. Are you already kind of salivating looking at a guy like Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Jordan Travis, Spencer Rattler as guys that could potentially be Shrine Bowl quarterbacks in 2024?
100%. I think one of the benefits of, quarterbacks being older, we had the Hendon Hooker ad nauseum discussion about his age. It was crazy. And a lot of quarterbacks in last year's class were on the older side. That's going to happen just because of the COVID year. But one of the benefits of that is like we've seen 2 or 3 years of these guys, right? In the past, or in sometimes, a guy like Spencer Rattler transfers South Carolina. He's there 1 year. You got to kind of make a big judgment. We're going to get 2 years of Rattler at South Carolina. We're going to get multiple years of Bo Nix thriving at Oregon, right? We're going to get Michael Pratt after his huge game against USC doing that again at Tulane as well too. A lot of quarterbacks across the country that are really impressive. So I think that one of the benefits of these guys being a little bit older is that we've seen more. Cam Rising's a guy we've loved forever, right? And he's going to be in his third year at Utah as the guy with kind of new offense, and how does he handle that? And, what kind of player can he be with maybe out Dalton Kincaid? So I think it's a strong quarterback class, but I think a lot of these guys, that's why I think teams will feel it's safe. A lot of these guys have already shown who they can be in the NFL. And I think they'll show hopefully some more upside this year. We'll see who kind of rises to the top. But I think teams are going to feel really good about 16, 17 guys in this class at quarterback that may be draft picks, maybe high PFAs just on supply and demand. But I think there's a lot of guys that we've seen enough, and I'm excited to see, hey, can Rattler take that next step? Can Bo take that next step? Can all these guys take that next step? Because they have the talent that shows, hey, they're already NFL quarterbacks. How high can they go?
Absolutely. You mentioned the offensive tackle class before. That's something I wanted to ask you about too, because Olu Fashanu is a guy who's coming back to school, who could have been a first-round pick. Joe Alt is a guy a lot of people are excited about. Notre Dame, J.C. Latham from Alabama. How do you see right now the order of the offensive tackles in next year's draft? Because every board I look at basically has a different order for any of them.
Yeah, I mean, Olu's pretty special. And I think the exciting part about Olu in particular, Fashanu from Penn State, is, and one of the things we look for as an evaluator, is A, can this player get better year to year? I tell players all the time, NFL scouts want to look at your 2022 film and your 2023 film and play one of those like what spot the difference games, right? Like you saw in like those old kids magazines, right? Like, hey, where did you get better? And I think along with that Olu's shown, there are some things that you watch on film that are very clear that he can get better at. And despite that, he's still dominating guys, right? And when you see guys who are like, you know what, he's winning, and also there's like 3 things he can get better at, like, I don't know what that ceiling is, but it's crazy. That's why I think Olu is a pretty special guy. So I would say he's the top guy. I've watched certainly Joe Alt and Blake Fisher at Notre Dame as well, too. They're both talented as well, too. But there's probably 3 or 4 more tackles that could have been first-round picks. And we saw some guys last year kind of rise. Anton Harrison, a guy not talked about a whole lot, and then he was a consensus first-round pick, talking with teams as well, too. There's a good number of those guys. So, again, I think there'll be maybe not as many offensive tackles in round 1, but there'll be more in the top 100 this year than last year for sure.
So I know these are probably a couple of guys that you unfortunately won't be able to have in the Shrine Bowl, but Caleb Williams and Drake May, you mentioned them before. How
good
they
players.
Are great players.
Good scouting by you. Good scouting by you, Max. They're good players.
Yeah, very good players. One of the interesting conversations I think people have is, some people have Drake May as QB1. A lot of people have Caleb Williams as QB1. And then, my coworker Trevor Sickham actually had Bo Nix as QB2.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that, Trevor.
Wow. Yeah. So there's a lot of, diverse opinions on this quarterback class. Where do you land, in June right now as we head into the season?
Love it, Trevor. Going for the page views. I love it, man. Whatever works, man. Drive that traffic. No, I mean, Bo's a great quarterback too. No offense to Bo. But, I think Drake is really exciting. especially with some of the off scripts that he does in the pocket. And I think he's a guy that quarterback coaches are going to see and say, hey, I've seen that player before, and that player is a really good player, right? I think he did some stuff, and maybe the ACC comparisons there too, but a lot of the same confidence in the pocket, stepping up in a muddled pocket in traffic, finishing downfield that we saw in Trevor Lawrence, right? Different players for sure, but a lot of that, like, hey, when things are breaking down, that guy really has a cool factor. I don't know how I stack up him and Drake, and I'm sorry, him and Caleb, but man, Caleb might be special. Yeah. Caleb might be one of the best quarterbacks of the last 25 years, right? I think he's already shown in that atmosphere of Andrew Luck and Trevor Lawrence and those kind of guys. I think he's already there. I'm not saying Drake can't get there as well, but I think we've seen some really special stuff from Caleb late in games. Even some of the easy throws he makes. I saw a play where he went through like 4 progressions and hit a backside corner, like 25 yards down, like a 55-yard throw, and did it so casually. And again, he's a guy that I know his background, thankfully, he's had great coaching, but there's, again, like Olu Fashanu, there's things that he can clean up, but it's so natural and effortless for him that he's got that natural instincts as a quarterback that I haven't seen in a long time. And Andrew Luck was one that kind of had it as well too. Andrew's a guy that when the offensive line wasn't there, he could step up and make some outstanding throws or improvise a little bit and still be on balance enough to make these kind of throws. Or, Andrew had that famous play, I think in Indianapolis, right, where he's getting tackled and he's leaning forward and still had the touch pass on a 60-yard throw. Like, that's stuff that no quarterback coach can coach. You can't coach that. And it sounds cliche, but not many guys really have that. I think Caleb does. So I'm excited to see Drake. I'm going to see Drake here in a little bit at Manning Passing Academy. My first live exposure to him as well too. But I've got a chance to speak with Caleb and know the family a little bit and know where he's come from. And again, I think the expectations should be really high for Caleb, and he'll, Heisman Trophy win and a great season already. But again, this guy might be really, really special. But he and Drake I think both those quarterbacks would have been, in the mix to be one of the top guys the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I hate to keep asking about underclassmen, honestly, but I feel like so many people are going nuts over Marvin Harrison Jr., who they calling him one of the best wide receiver prospects in the last decade or so. What do you see from him? And do you think he is as good as maybe a Jamar Chase, as good as an Amari Cooper coming out in the last decade or so?
I think so, man. I think guys like Marvin Harrison are a palate cleanser sometimes because they're just like, man, that guy's good. And it's one of those things. Marvin's a guy where you don't take notes, right? You just like, hey, this guy is awesome. And like, it's questions like how good is he going to be something that I think he'll determine his NFL career, right? He's not going to slip in the draft, right? Marvin's going to be the top receiver in next year's draft. And no matter what, if he doesn't play this year, with the top receiver taken too. I think that, and similar to Jamar Chase, right? Jamar didn't play a senior year and he still went top 5. I'm not saying Marvin shouldn't play a senior year last year, but doesn't really need to be a top overall pick. I think the interesting on Marvin is I think the real attention to detail on as an in-air receiver and a jump ball player. That's one area I think a lot of college guys, especially for major programs, sometimes lack a little bit just because at times they're really open. Right. Jamar had that too, right? Not that he can't separate, but like at LSU, sometimes he was like really open a lot because he's just so much more athletic than these guys. And Marvin has that too, but you can tell on film that has that extra focus and extra concentration, extra timing. I know how much he works on it in the off season. Obviously his dad had incredible hands and incredible, timing as a pass catcher as well too. So I think Marvin has that one level more than like, I think he already knows what he's going to have to adapt to in the NFL. And rookie receivers, you guys know, so few often work out at a very high level. When they do, it's special. And I feel as confident in any rookie receiver having a great year in the last decade in Marvin Harrison Jr. Not saying he'll be better than Jamar Chase, but I'm pretty damn sure he's going to have a good rookie season right away in the NFL. Just the way he works and his focus is on the offseason and what he cares about is a good sign for his future.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. All right, last underclassman I want to ask you about, I promise. But a guy that, I never thought we'd talk about a tight end as good as Kyle Pitts ever again. And then, of course, Brock Bowers comes in as the best tight end in college football the last 2 years, which was also his first 2 years of college football. How special do you think Brock Bowers is? And maybe he's not a similar player to Kyle Pitts, but do you think he could be talked about as that special of a tight end prospect when it's all said and done?
I think for Bowers, part of it's going to be the athletic testing. I think he's going to test really well, but I think that's what kind of cemented Kyle Pitts. Really, that position, to be worth that high of a draft pick, you've got to be a pretty special athlete. I think he will be as well. Kyle Pitts, I've always joked that he just needs a rebrand to a receiver, right? He's just not really a tight end. I mean, he's shown he can block a little bit, but he's just like Mike Gesicki. He's not a tight end. I joke all the time, like he's just a big receiver, slot receiver. I think Kyle's that same way as well. But Kyle being as big as he was and dynamic in the seam, and then you run a wheel route on the outside, it's hard to beat him on that point. I think Bowers is ahead of where Kyle was as a blocker, certainly. I think he's at the frame to be more consistent in line. And I think the seam stuff, just because Georgia's had to use him there, whereas Kyle didn't have to do as much like in traffic, linebacker, safety seam stuff as Bowers does. I think it's pretty close. I think they're a little bit different enough that you can say, hey, it's, pick your flavor. And certainly it's hard because Kyle has not had the production in the NFL that we thought, not really his fault, in my opinion, but same production. But no, I think Bowers, Harrison, Caleb, Drake, May, Olu Fushanu, I mean, that's probably your top 5 picks in next year's draft. Maybe one guy slides in there too. But again, these guys don't change their stripes. And I think all 5 of those guys are going to be, what position do you need? They'll be 5 of the first 7 picks in next year's draft. And we'll see if a defensive guy or another quarterback like Quinn Ewers or whoever gets up in that same tier as well. But I think Bowers will be a guy that, hey, just put the pen down. Great player, elite player. Stop running the scouting reports, waste your time. Draft him early and see how he does in the NFL.
So you mentioned all those elite prospects already. All of them are offensive players. It looks initially like a weaker defensive class. Do you agree with that? And what are the positions that you're looking at right now? It's like, okay, maybe that position on defense isn't as bad as we thought initially.
Again, similar to offense, this was also the lowest number of drafted off-ball linebackers in a decade. And I think that's a trend of just most college teams are starting 2, not 3, right? And edge rush are so important. And we're seeing, even though Jack Campbell was drafted where he should have been, in my opinion, I love Jack Campbell as a prospect. I think a lot of teams are just valuing linebacker, and it's not a great linebacker class next year as well. But it does feel like safety, edge rusher, corner, as expected, are going to be strong points for the next year's draft class. And I think that this past year's safety, good, not great class. We had a couple guys go in the top 50, 75 picks. Next year's class will be really strong.
Absolutely. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is there any a rising senior that you're looking at right now and saying, man, I really want him to come to Dallas and play in the Shrine Bowl next year?
Oh, I can't get that way. My competitor might listen to this podcast, but I'll say this: we're excited about being in Texas, and I think there's a lot of talent that's from Texas and went elsewhere, playing at UT, TCU, SMU, Houston, North Texas, UTSA, et cetera, too. That I'm thankful that, hey, we want to make sure we have a lot of good Texas players at the Shrine Bowl this year because of our location and also, building a good cohesion there as well, too. But I'm thankful, man. We've had a lot of great players come to the Shrine Bowl in past years, and I think the word's gotten out that what we're doing is something pretty awesome, pretty special for these guys, and hopefully get a chance to enjoy it. Come practice at the Cowboys facility, which is pretty awesome, all week long, be on national TV, get coached by NFL coaches. And I think there's a lot of players, O-line, D-line, quarterback, et cetera, that are already kind of seeing that vibe too. So there's a couple quarterbacks I really want to have there that I'm bullish on, and a couple guys that some of those non-combine guys, NFL scouts have already told me, oh, you're too high on him, Eric. And I say challenge accepted. So we've already got our board, already got a list of guys we're looking for next year. We're really excited to have them there.
Absolutely. So a couple more questions. So what are your favorite positions?
Good try, Max. Good try.
I really tried. I wanted to get a quarterback.
I appreciate it.
I needed a quarterback out of you, but it's fine. It's fine. What are your favorite positions to turn on the tape for and start your initial scouting process every single year?
Not quarterback. Quarterback is you got to settle in and I got to watch 5 games here, and it's going to take me a day to watch a quarterback. I love watching O-line. I think O-linemen kind of reveal themselves pretty early on in the game tape. There's times where you can watch, a first half of the game, you get a good sense, second half a little bit, you can watch more passively too. But I think offensive line is a position that either we've had strength on as well as kind of reveals himself a little bit early on. But O-line, cornerback, another one that is a labor of love to watch. But again, those guys, you have to watch a lot of film. They're what we call preventer positions, O-line and DBs, right? Where you have 45 good snaps and 5 bad snaps. But as an offensive lineman, you give up 5 sacks, you're out of a job, you're a bad player. So you got to watch a lot of snaps. But I think those guys kind of reveal their ability pretty early on too. So I like watching those early in my process and kind of expectation set. And then, of course, again, watching Brock Bowers and Marvin Harrison Jr., just putting those guys on, closing the notebook and just watching with a cup of coffee or a beer, depending on what time of the day it is, and enjoying it.
I love that. So last question I want to ask you, a lot of people that watch this channel want to get into the player evaluation business. I'm sure would love to work for you at the Shrine Bowl. What advice would you give those people trying to enter the business of player evaluation?
Yeah, I love it, man. It's a huge passion of mine. And honestly, it's because I never had anybody help me when I first started out, right? I was a backup quarterback in my playing days, right? Wasn't an NFL player, wasn't a major college player either. And I've been a huge passion of mine to get people, especially in non-traditional routes, to get to the NFL. And we've had, thankfully, a lot of people, upwards of 20 over the last 5-6 years from our staff, whether I was in the Shrine Bowl or the XFL, go to the NFL. So it's a huge passion of mine. And a couple of things I'd say is one, focus on background. Everyone has an opinion, right? Scouting reports are subjective, right? They're like opinions. Everyone's got them, right? But at the same time, you show me on a background, I've done the research on who this player is, not necessarily interview him, but show me I know where this player has come from. For me, that matters a lot because that shows me your desire to research and work hard, right? So do the things that you think are small and don't matter, but do a really good job at those. Secondly, to the same point, have a scouting report ready. And when I say scouting report, include the background and scouting report. You have no idea how many people email me about a job. I'm like, okay, tell me what you have. Oh, I don't have anything. Okay. And then lastly, I think it's be patient and really try to build and ask and connect with people at a high level, know why you're connecting with them and connect with them without asking for something, right? We've thankfully brought a lot of people who didn't know they wanted to work in the scouting world or didn't ask me for a job, but they were kind of always my radar. I've got people right now, 6-7 people that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, whether social media or elsewhere, to kind of see where they're at when we have openings, bring people on there too. And I think networking is a lost art. And social media, which I think is crazy. I've met most of my good friends in this business and NFL people through Twitter. So you have the ability to kind of DM whoever. And I think reaching out, connecting with people, being prepared, not asking for jobs, best way to go about it too. But my biggest advice is everyone can go on Twitter and say, I think this guy's great. Here's what I think of him. Hip fluidity, this, and athleticism, that too. But doing the research on who these guys are, I think shows me that, hey, I know the grunt work it takes to be an NFL scout and I want to get there. So again, anybody listening to this podcast, you want to learn about how the NFL scout, my DMs are open. DM me. I'm happy to touch base with you and tell you how to do it because it's a passion of mine. If you really care about it, you'll get there at some point.
Eric, this is a phenomenal interview, man. I hope to see you in Dallas at the Shrine Bowl. But regardless, man, this is a phenomenal interview. I really appreciate you taking time out.
We'll see down there. I'll message you some guys I like in the senior class offline. We're not recording here. I'm not on the record here, all right? That's fair enough. So I appreciate it. Once again, thanks for having me on, man. Big fan of the show and best luck moving forward, man. But I appreciate you.